Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Samech Amud Beis. Starting with Daf Samech Amud Aleph, 6 lines from the bottom. Our Mishnah states, if a person brings a korban lishmoi and shaloi lishmoi, it's possible. And therefore, if he brings a korban l'shem Pesach and l'shem Shlomim, it's possible. The question the Gemara has is, are we talking about one avodah or two avodas? As follows. If it's one avodah, means when he does the shchita, he has both kavanas in mind. If it means that he's doing two avodas, that means when he does the shchita, he has in mind the shmoi, the shem korban Pesach. And when he does, for example, the zrikas hadam, then he has in mind the korban shlomim. The ramifications for this would be based on a machlokes we have in Tmura. The Gemara explains that when it comes to an animal, and a person says, I want this animal harezu tmuras oila tmuras shlomim. So what does he mean? According to Rabbi Meir, yustfois loshen rishon. It therefore is going to be a korban oila. Whereas according to Rabbi Yossi, we take both statements that he made into account, and therefore we say that since he said both korban oila and korban shlomim, therefore it has the status of both, whereby you have to let the animal graze. It gets a mum. After it gets the mum, then you can sell it and then use half the money towards an oila and half of the money towards a shlomim. That have ramifications for us because that would mean that if it's one avodah, then it was possible only according to Rabbi Yossi. However, if it's two avodos, because going back, if it's one avodah, that what you're saying is l'shem korban Pesach and l'shem korban shlomim, then where toifes lashon rishon according to Rabbi Meir would be valid. So only according to Rabbi Yossi it's invalid. That it's possible. That's what our Mishnah says. But if you go like the second side, that we're talking about two avodos, then both Rabbi Yossi as well as Rabbi Meir would say that it's possible, like our Mishnah states. The Gemara wants to prove, are we talking about one avodah or two avodos from the following? Says the Gemara, Toshma, bringing the Mishnah lekamon daf samech aleph amud aleph. Le'oichlov v'shaloi le'oichlov. Kosher. He does so, le'oichlov and shaloi le'oichlov. The Gemara explains, what does that mean? Hey chidami, what's the case? If you're going to say he does two avodos, for example, he does the shchita, the shem le'oichlov, and he does the zrikas hadam, the shem shaloi le'oichlov. By the way, oichlov means, for the sake of those who are going to be able to eat a kezayis of basar, which is what's required. And shaloi la'oichlov are those who are not able to eat the meat, at least a kezayis, zikanim, elderly, or cholim, or sick people. So Al Kapon, the Gemara says, if you want to talk about, we're talking about two avodos, and that's why it's kosher. And when it comes to then the machshava of shaloi la'oichlov during the zrika, it has no significance to poisil, and therefore that's why it's kosher over here. Then ba'avoda achat kigom b'shchita the mahanya be'machshavas oichlin posul. Then the diuk would be that if it's only one avoda, that means during the shchita you say lo oichlov and shaloi lo oichlov, then it would come out would be posul. And yet says the Gemara that can't be v'ho kaimalon mixas oichlin loy pasla. That when you have the korban shechted for those who are eating it, that can eat it, as well as those one who cannot, then it is still valid, since it is for those who eat it. So therefore, it cannot be that the case of la'oichlov and shul la'oichlov is talking about two different avodos. Tav of Samech Aleph Amud Beis, Samech Amud Beis, elolav ba'avoida achas. Rather, we must be talking about one avoida over here when it says la'oichlov and shul la'oichlov is done during the shchita. That means even in one avoida is going to be kosher. And if the fact that this Mishnah on Daf Samech Aleph Amud Aleph is even going to be then valid when it's talking about one, when it's one avoida, then Reishanai ba'avoida achas. Then we can say that our case, our Mishnah of Lishmoi and Mishlo Lishmoi is talking about one avoida. And thereby it would mean that our author of our Mishnah that says it's possible is Rabbi Yossi. The Gemara challenges and says, Midei area, do you have such a proof Behold, we can say that like that it is, and like that it is. As follows. Seifa ba'avoida achas. Granted, like we just proved on Samech Aleph Amud Aleph, the Mishnah over there, is talking about even when it's just one avoida. Whereas the Reisha, oy ba'avoida achas, oy b'shtei avoidas. There it could be talking about, in our Mishnah, that it's one avoida, or only two avoidos. And as you have no proof to say it's dafka one avoida. Now the Gemara asks a new question. Here it's going to speak about a Korban Pesach, and the din of a Korban Pesach is that if a Korban Pesach that was designated as a Korban Pesach is then brought during other days of the year other than the time of the Korban Pesach of Yudalid ben Nisan, then it's valid as a Korban Shlomim. So we know that if the Korban Pesach, however, is brought as a Korban Pesach on any other day of the year, it's not going to be valid. So the Gemara asks the following question. Pesach sheshochtoi b'shar yemois hashana. A Korban Pesach that was shechted, that was already designated as a Korban Pesach, and let's say a week before Pesach, it was shechted as a Korban, it was shechted. So, lishmoy v'lo shlo lishmoy. And he has two intentions. He says both is going to be l'shem Korban Pesach and the Shem Korban Shlomim. What would be the din when he expresses both things? Mi osi shaloi lishmoi umapik le midi lishmoi umachshir le oiloi. Do we say that the fact that the loy lishmoi, this case meaning the Shlomim, is going to then remove the status as a Korban Pesach, the Shem Korban Pesach lishmoi, whereby it will be valid? Or no, or we say it's invalid because after all, he did say also the Shem Korban Pesach. Ki also Rav Dimi Omar, when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said the following argument. Amriso l'shmaitze kamed Rabbi Yochanan. He explained that I argued the following argument in front of Rabbi Yirmiyahu in Eretz Yisrael. Hoyil v'lishmoi machshiroi bizmanoi v'shelo lishmoi machshiroi shelo bizmanoi. Since that if a person would then bring a Korban Pesach lishmoi in its right time on Yudalid ben Nisan, it would be valid. And if he would bring then shaloi lishmoi on any other day of the year, it would also be valid as a Korban Shlomim. Ma lishmoi umachshir bizmano ein motziyoi midei shelo lishmoi. And just as if it was lishmoi the Shem Korban Pesach during its designated time on Yudalid, if you also then said it should be the Shem Korban Shlomim, it will not be valid. So too, af shelo lishmoi hamachshir shelo bizmano ein motzi midei lishmoi basel. So too, then, if then it was another day of the year other than Yudalid, and he brought it as Shaloi Lishmoi, as a Korban Shlomim, but he also mentioned Lishmo, certainly then that would also not remove the status of the Korban Pesach, and it would be invalid. It would be possible. So that's the argument to explain that if a person brings the Korban, both Lishmoi and Lo Lishmoi, the Hainu, he brings on another day of the year as a Korban that's going to be for the sake of a Shlomim and also for the Korban as a Korban Pesach, is not going to be valid. The Omar li Rabbi Yirmiyahu then responded to me, Loi, that's not a good analogy. Im amarta b'shaloi lishmoi. If you said, in the case of shaloi lishmoi, shekein noiheg b'kol hazvachim. That is so, shaloi lishmoi, in the case of all other korbanos, it would make those korbanos so that the body doesn't get a kapara, it will have an adverse effect on that korban. Toimar, would you say bilishmoi shekain eino noyeg bekol hazvachim elo pesach bilvad? Will you say that so also when it comes to lishmoi? When every time of the year in any other korban, when a person does it lishmoi, it doesn't have any adverse effect, except for this case over here of korban pesach. In other words, the Korban Pesach should not affect adversely when you also then do it Shaloi Lishmoi, that for the sake of the Korban Shlomim. The Gemara now wants to know, my have Allah, what is the ultimate halachic decision in regards to this discussion? Omar Rava said the following argument. Pesach sheshochtoi b'shar yemois hashana lishmoi v'shelo lishmoi is kosher. Rabbi begins by saying like this: if an animal was designated as a korban Pesach, and then comes one day of the year, let's say a week before Pesach, and he now shechs it shelo lishmoi dahainu l'shem korban shlomim, it's valid. We say it's valid. He didn't shech it l'shmoi v'shelo lishmoi. It was already designated as a korban Pesach, and now he shechs it l'shem shlomim. We say it's valid. So if that's the case, he says the stam or lishmoi koi, because there the stam is that it's a korban Pesach, because that's what you made it into initially. So when you shecht it shaloi lishmoi for the sake of korban shlomim, it had removed the status of a korban Pesach. So therefore we see that the shaloi lishmoi is able to then remove the lishmoi. Then therefore vafilu hachi ki shachit le shaloi lishmoi kosher. Then even when you do explicitly state that it's going to be lishmoi and shaloi lishmoi, then the shaloi lishmoi will then remove the status of the lishmoi of the korban Pesach. It should be valid. Alma osi shaloi lishmoi mapik le midish lishmoi. Ki shachit nami lishmoi shaloi lishmoi osi shaloi lishmoi umapik le midish lishmoi. So this is the svar of Rava. Rava is saying again that if you have a korban Pesach, and then you take that korban Pesach a week before Pesach, and now you shecht it, the shem shlomim, it's valid. What do we see from there? It must be that the korban shlomim, the shaloi lishmo, remove the status of the shmo, of the korban Pesach. So therefore, he argues, if that's the case, then so too when it comes to somebody who shechts it both lishmoi explicitly and shaloi lishmoi. The lo lishmoi will also remove the status of the korban Pesach during the rest of the year. And it should be valid. That's Rava's argument. Rav Adabar says to Rava, wait a second. That can be then argued against. That svara we can mechalik. Because when a person has a korban that was originally made as a korban Pesach, and it's only implicitly a korban Pesach, so when he shechs it and he says it's the korban shlomim, it's valid. But when he explicitly, during the shas of now bringing up the korban, he says it's lishma and shaloi lishma, then that's different. As follows: Dilmo shiny heicha do omar me heicha do lo omar. Perhaps it's different when he does explicitly say. First, if he doesn't say anything, and I'll prove to you that there's a difference when somebody explicitly states or just it's implicit. As follows: the Mishnah states again on Daf Samech Aleph Amud Aleph, when a person then will shecht la'oichlov and shalo la'oichlov, both for those who can eat a kezayis basar, the korban Pesach, as well as those who cannot. Yet, when he just shechs it for those who can not eat, the zakenim or the chodim who cannot eat a kezayis of korban Pesach, it's possible. Ask Rav Adabar v'amai, why should this be possible? V'ho stama la'oichlov koi. The stama is, when he doesn't specify, that it's also for la'oichlov. So when he says that it's la'oichav l'chudei, it's also for la'oichlov. And yet, we sing that it's invalid. Elashayni heicha da omar heicha da lo omar. Rather, you see from here that it's different whether it's explicitly stated or not. Here, since he explicitly states that it's the shalo la'oichlov l'chudei, it makes it so it's possible. Hochanami, so too over here. Shiny heicha da omar me heicha da lo omar. So too over here in our case, when he will state specifically and explicitly that this is going to be the shem korban Pesach and the shem shlomim, it's going to be invalid. So therefore, the fact that if it's stam korban Pesach, and now a week before Pesach, he brings it as a korban shlomim, that's going to be valid because it's only implicit. But if you were to specify that it's a korban Pesach and a korban shlomim, then it won't be valid. Or Ma'alei, Rava defend himself, meet the area. What kind of proof is that? From Oichlov, Vishaloi Oichlov, that over there we see that there's a difference between explicit and implicit. Vishloma Hasam, over there in the case what I'm talking about, when it comes to a korban Pesach, so long as he's not uprooted the korban Pesach designation, then we say stama vadai lishmoi koi. It's still going to be considered to be stama lishmoi. That means if he didn't do anything, then since he originally made it into korban pesach, it has the status of a korban pesach. So therefore, it has weight, it has significance as a korban pesach. So therefore, when he does shecht it lekorban shlomim, then we say the korban shlomim removes the status of a korban pesach. So too, Rava argues, when he would make a korban and say it's lishma and shal lishma, both as a korban pesach and a korban shlomim, it will also remove the status of a korban pesach and be valid. But over here, in regards to lo eichlov shal lo eichlov, hacha stame lo eichlov koi, is the stam, if you don't specify, is it always going to be for lo eichlov? Not so, it won't be. Why? Because Dilma, mimshichi hani v'osi achrinu mimni alave. Because perhaps those who were included initially to be in the chabura as counted as those who are going to participate in this korban pesach, they can easily remove themselves before the korban pesach is shechted, and others will be replaced instead of them. Like it says in the Mishnah, this nan. Nimnin umoishchin es yedehem mimenu ashe yishchat. The rule is that those who were included in this chabura for the shechting and the eating of korban pesach, they can remove themselves from that chabura before the shechita of the korban pesach, whereby others will then be included. So there's no such thing as stamma status. If it's not explicit, then they're not considered to be part of the chabura, and therefore you don't have an argument, says Rava, against me, whereby Rava reinstates his claim that over here we're talking about indeed, if he does bring a korban as a korban pesach and as a korban shlomim, we say shma and shlo lishma in this case, the korban shlomim, again, when it's not on Yud Daled ben Nisan, will remove the status of a korban pesach and will be a valid korban.